I thought my niece was hiding from a family crisis until I found illegal weapon hardware in her bag and a photo of my own face circled in red. Now, a radical group is closing in on our secluded house, and I've become the central target in a terrifying, organized scheme. Your niece is moving into our country house for a month? How, Mark, have you lost your mind? Elena's voice hit a pitch that I hadn't heard since we accidentally missed our flight to the Maldives 3 years ago. She was standing in the middle of our minimalist kitchen, a half-packed suitcase at her feet. We were supposed to be leaving for our own getaway, a quiet, isolated retreat to our newly finished country house to celebrate our 10th anniversary. Just the two of us. No phones, no work, no drama. Or so I had promised. It's not a permanent thing, Elle. It's just 30 days, I said, trying to keep my voice as steady as possible while I avoided her gaze. Sarah is in a really bad spot. She called me crying last night. She said Maya needs to get out of the city immediately. It's a matter of safety. Safety? What kind of safety, Mark? Your sister has been a walking disaster for years. She's always involved with some organized scheme or another, and now she's dragging us into it? We built that house to be our sanctuary, not a safe house for a teenager who probably has the same habits as her mother. She's 18, Elena. She's not a child, and she's not Sarah, I countered, though my own confidence was flickering. My sister had a history of running with the wrong crowd, people who didn't care about the law, but Maya had always seemed like the victim of her mother's chaos, not a participant. I don't care, Elena snapped. I spent 6 months picking out the tiles for that bathroom. I spent every weekend overseeing the landscaping. I am not letting a girl we haven't seen in 5 years come in and ruin it because Sarah is being investigated by some internal security service again. The mention of the internal security service made me flinch. It was true that Sarah had been under an internal verification last year for her ties to some group involved in an organized scheme, but I had been told that Maya was clean. She was just a kid who wanted to go to art school. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent sound that sliced through the tension in the room. Elena froze. I looked at the security monitor. A black sedan was idling at the curb, and a thin girl with an oversized hoodie and dark circles under her eyes was standing on our porch. She was clutching a single duffel bag as if her life depended on it. "She's here," I whispered. The drive to the country house was agonizingly silent. Elena sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. Maya sat in the back, huddled against the door, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. She looked like a cornered animal. Every time a car stayed behind us for more than 2 turns, she would visibly stiffen. When we finally reached the house, a beautiful cedar structure tucked away in the deep woods, miles from the nearest neighbor, the sun was already dipping below the horizon. The shadows of the towering pines stretched across the driveway like long, dark fingers. "You'll stay in the guest loft," Elena said, her voice dripping with ice as she showed Maya to the upper floor. "The rules are simple. No guests, no noise, and don't touch anything in the master wing." Maya nodded mutely. She hadn't said more than 3 words since we picked her up. As she climbed the stairs, I noticed her hand was shaking so violently she had to grip the railing. Later that night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a faint scratching sound. I thought it might be a branch against the window, but then I heard a muffled voice. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Elena, and crept toward the hallway. The light under Maya's door was on. "I have them," she was whispering. Her voice was trembling. "No, they don't know. They think I'm just here to hide. But the package is safe. No, please, don't hurt her. I'll get the money. I just need a week. My heart hammered against my ribs. The package. What package? I turned to go back to my room, intending to wake Elena and tell her she was right, that we were in over our heads, when I saw Elena already standing in the shadows of the hallway. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the duffel bag Maya had brought, which was now sitting open on the console table in the hallway. Maya must have left it there when she went to get a glass of water. Elena reached into the bag and pulled out a small, heavy object wrapped in dark plastic. As she unwrapped it, her face went white. It wasn't money. It wasn't a package of forbidden substances. It was a piece of illegal weapon hardware, a heavy, cold, metallic part of something that looked like it belonged to a radical group's arsenal. But that wasn't the worst part. At the bottom of the bag, Elena pulled out a manila folder. She opened it and a stack of photos fell out onto the hardwood floor. They weren't photos of Sarah, or some criminals, or art projects. They were surveillance photos of our house. Not Maya's house, our country house. And in every single photo, there was a red circle drawn around my face. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stared at the photo of myself taken from a distance while I was standing on our balcony in the city, unaware that anyone was watching. In the image, a red circle was drawn around my head, and a series of numbers, dates, and times were scribbled in the margin. "Mark, what is this?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. She was holding the piece of illegal weapon hardware like it was a live coal. "Why do they have photos of you? Why does your niece have a part of a dangerous device in her luggage?" I couldn't answer. My mind was racing through every interaction I'd had over the last year. I was a structural engineer. I worked on municipal projects, bridges, and occasionally high-security government annexes. Had I seen something I wasn't supposed to? Or was this about Sarah's organized scheme? "I don't know, Elle. I swear," I said, reaching out to take the folder from her. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind us. We both spun around. Maya was standing at the top of the stairs, her silhouette framed by the dim light of the hallway. She wasn't wearing her hoodie anymore, and in the low light she looked older, harder. Her eyes weren't filled with the tears I'd seen earlier. They were filled with a cold, calculated desperation. "You weren't supposed to look in there," Maya said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the shaking tone she had used in the car. "Maya, what is going on?" I demanded, trying to sound like the authoritative uncle, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "What is this equipment? And why are there photos of me in your bag?" Maya took a slow step down the stairs, then another. "My mother didn't send me here for my safety, Mark. She sent me here because this house is the only place they can't track yet, and because they need you." "Who needs him? The radicals your mother works with?" Elena stepped forward, her fear turning into a protective rage. "Get out! I don't care if it's 2 a.m. Get out of my house!" Maya reached into the pocket of her jeans and pulled out a burner phone. "It's too late for that. They're already in the perimeter. If I don't signal them in the next 5 minutes that the package is ready, they won't come to negotiate. They'll just come to finish the job." "The job?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "What job, Maya?" "They think you have the encryption keys for the new internal security hub," she said, her voice finally beginning to crack. "The project you finished last month. They've been following you for weeks, but the city was too high risk. They needed you somewhere isolated, somewhere like this." My stomach dropped. The internal security hub was a project I'd worked on as a consultant. It was a high-priority facility designed to track organized schemes across the region. If a radical group got the encryption keys, they could erase their own records, or worse, track the very agents who were hunting them. I don't have the keys, I said, my voice rising in panic. Those stay on the secure server. I only had access to the structural blueprints. They don't believe that, Maya whispered. And they have my mom. They told me if I didn't get them to you, they'd make sure she faced a huge term. Or worse. I didn't have a choice, Uncle Mark. I'm sorry. Elena grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. Mark, we have to call for help. The local authorities. Anyone. The signal is jammed, Maya said, holding up her burner phone. Look at the bars. They've been following us since we left the city. They're waiting in the woods. I looked toward the large floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the dark forest. Usually the view was peaceful, a sea of black pines under a starlit sky. Now the darkness felt predatory. I imagined eyes watching us from between the trees, waiting for the signal. We have to leave. Now, I said, grabbing Elena's hand. We'll take the SUV. It has enough power to break through the gate if we have to. You won't make it to the driveway, Maya said, her voice trembling now. They've already blocked the road. Then we hide, Elena said, her eyes darting around the room. The basement. It's reinforced. As we turned to run toward the stairs leading to the basement, a sudden blinding light erupted from the woods. A high-powered searchlight swept across the front of the house, illuminating the living room with a surgical, terrifying brightness. Then the sound of a heavy drone hummed overhead, vibrating the very glass in the windows. It wasn't a hobbyist's toy, it was a professional-grade surveillance unit. Mark, Elena screamed as a red laser dot appeared on the wall right next to my head. It danced across the wallpaper, steady and precise, before settling directly over my heart. I tackled Elena to the floor just as the front door didn't kick open, but rather, the electronic lock let out a long, high-pitched beep. The security system, the one I had spent thousands of dollars on to keep us safe, had just been remotely overridden. The heavy oak door swung open slowly, revealing nothing but the pitch-black night and the silhouette of a man standing on the porch, holding a device that looked like a signal interceptor. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply pointed at me. But it wasn't the man that made my blood run cold. It was the sound coming from the kitchen, the sound of someone already inside the house, moving quietly behind us, cutting off our only exit to the basement. I looked up at Maya, who was still standing on the stairs. She wasn't looking at the man at the door. She was looking at the kitchen, her face twisted in a mask of pure horror. "That's not them," she whispered, her voice failing. "That's someone else." The man in the kitchen stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing a mask and he wasn't carrying a weapon. Instead, he held a badge and a tablet that flickered with data. "Everyone stay exactly where you are," the man commanded. His voice was calm, authoritative. "I am Agent Vance from the Internal Security Service. Mark, Elena, Maya, get behind the kitchen island now." Before I could process the shock, the windows in the living room shattered simultaneously. The radicals from the woods didn't use stones. They used high-pressure sonic devices that turned our expensive glass into dust. Two figures in dark gear vaulted through the frames, their faces obscured by tactical visors. They were part of the organized scheme Maya had warned us about, and they looked professional, cold, and ready to kill. "Where is the hardware?" one of them growled, his voice distorted by a modulator. Vance didn't hesitate. He pulled a small, high-tech device from his belt and pressed a button. A high-frequency whine filled the room, making my ears bleed. The intruders doubled over, clutching their helmets. "Maya, the bag!" Vance shouted over the noise. Maya, who had been frozen on the stairs, suddenly leaped into action. She grabbed the duffel bag Elena had dropped and threw it toward the kitchen island. But she wasn't aiming for us. She was aiming for the intruders. As the bag hit the floor near the radicals, it didn't spill photos or metal parts. It exploded in a cloud of thick, neutralizing gas. "Mark, the basement now!" Vance yelled, grabbing my shoulder and shoving me toward the hidden door behind the pantry. We scrambled down the stairs, Elena's hand death-gripped in mine. Maya followed, her face pale but her eyes sharp. Vance was the last one in, slamming the reinforced steel door and locking it just as the sound of a struggle erupted in the living room above. "You're with them?" I gasped, looking at Vance as he checked his tablet. "You're the Internal Security Service?" "We've been monitoring this radical group for months," Vance said, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Maya's mother, Sarah, was caught in their network. She didn't join them. She was coerced. They needed a way to get to you, Mark. They knew about your work on the security hub. They thought you were the weak link." "And Maya?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. "Was she the bait?" "Maya was our only way inside," Vance said. "She contacted us 3 weeks ago. She's been working with our internal verification team to lead these criminals into a controlled environment. This house was the only place we could isolate them without civilian casualties." I looked at Maya. The niece I thought was a delinquent was actually a terrified teenager who had risked her life to save her mother and her family. "I'm sorry, Uncle Mark," Maya whispered, tears finally streaming down her face. "I didn't know how else to do it. They have my mom in a safe house now, but they told me if I didn't get them the encryption data from you, they'd kill us both. The security service promised they'd protect us if I helped them trap the ringleaders." Above us, the sounds of the struggle intensified, then abruptly stopped. A series of heavy thuds echoed through the floorboards. Vance's tablet chirped. "Team 2 has neutralized the perimeter," he announced. "The group is in custody. They're looking at an enormous term in a high-security facility. The organized scheme is effectively dismantled." When we finally emerged from the basement an hour later, our beautiful country house was a wreck. The glass was gone, the furniture was overturned, and the air smelled of ozone and gas. But as the sun began to rise over the trees, I saw a fleet of unmarked black vehicles parked in our driveway. A woman stepped out of one of the cars. She looked tired, her clothes rumpled, but when she saw Maya, she broke into a run. "Mom!" Maya cried, racing toward her. Sarah caught her daughter in a fierce embrace. They stood there for a long time. 2 survivors of a nightmare I had barely understood until tonight. Elena stood beside me, her hand still trembling as she watched them. She looked at our ruined sanctuary, then back at me. "We're not staying here, are we?" "No," I said, pulling her close. "We're going back to the city. But Sarah and Maya are coming with us, at least until they're settled." Elena sighed, a long, weary sound that ended in a small, shaky laugh. "Fine, but Maya is picking out the new tiles for the bathroom. She owes me that much." The threat was over. The radicals were gone, facing decades behind bars for their crimes. My work on the security hub was safe, and for the first time in years, my sister was free from the shadows. Our anniversary retreat hadn't been the quiet getaway I'd planned, but as I watched my family standing together in the morning light, I realized it was the most important anniversary we'd ever have. We were still here. We were still whole. And the secrets that had almost destroyed us were finally out in the open.